You create a story in your mind. And after you write that story, every time you read it again, the story that's in your mind exists alongside the story that's on the page. When you put some time in between the writing and then the revision, that image fades, but it doesn't, I don't think it ever goes away entirely. I have written books where I completely forget about a lot of the things going on in them because I have a particularly poor memory. But when I start reading again, a lot of stuff comes flooding back. So I don't know if it's ever possible to actually be objective about your own work. A lot of writers say to write with the door shut and revise with the door open. In my last video, I talked a bit about this, how you should write in the genre and about the subject matter that makes you happy, that makes writing the easiest if you hope to make it in this extremely competitive field. So while you're creating the stuff, you should do it without anyone else in mind. I think that you need to be your own target reader. Now that does mean that you need to think about what you're writing as yourself as a reader would find it. But still, you should be writing it for yourself. So if you listen to my advice, you're, even when you're revising, going to be creating for yourself. But that is a point where you do start to take in other people's writing advice. In the video before that, if I posted these in order, I talked about creating your own writing circle of support. One of the things that I mentioned is that it allows you to get readers who are aligned with you. Regular commenter Ikurasona pointed out that heeding too much advice can be paralyzing, especially for newer writers. This is a great point, and I think that it counts for both general writing advice and also specific critiques about your work. On the general writing advice, a comfortable way to procrastinate, but in a useful-ish way, would be to consume a lot of videos or books on writing. And I do think that this is okay, besides the fact that I have a writing channel, but not tips and tricks. I don't think that you need to make every mistake on your own. I think it's okay to learn from the people who came before you. But if you're not actively putting it to use, it starts to pile up. And the writing advice almost becomes solid, even though the problem is that you're not making it concrete. It gains this weight. It gets huge and unwieldy, and it keeps you from taking any step at all. Like, if you have learned 500 musts for writing your first sentence, you would have been better off learning a few, deciding on the best, and then just putting it to use. Another side effect of letting too many voices in is that you're probably being less discriminating, and you will likely pick up some bad advice, and you're going to end up with contradictory advice. So let's talk about this. First, let's discuss the opinions you get from readers. This is going to be the most voluminous advice that you get. It's not a bad problem to have. It means that people are reading your work. It means that people care enough about your work to go ahead and say something. Now, they might say something about every book, but that they read. So also consider that. Another good thing about reader comments is that unlike author comments necessarily, readers have sought your book out because they think that they're going to enjoy it. People read books that they want to read, whereas an author, friend, or just group member is going to read it because you asked them to. A reader is probably going to enjoy your genre and be sympathetic to the plights of writing that genre, as long as you presented your work accurately, which is very important. It is good to surprise a reader through execution. It is bad to surprise a reader about what they're getting. and you will get bad reviews if you do that. The thing about these readers is that while they can tell you how the book made them feel, not only can't they tell you how to fix the issue, although they may think that they can and put forward suggestions, they usually can't even tell you why the book made them feel that way. Listen to them when they say that something in the novel upset them, when it let them down, when it made them feel frustrated. But when they then say how they wish it could have gone, know that there are probably any number of ways that you could have executed the exact same events in a way that would not have left them feeling like that. Honestly, even educated readers who have studied English literature don't understand how we work the magic that we do to get the responses from them. Let's stay on the topic of magic. There could be somebody who goes to magic shows every night, and they are an absolute expert on presentation, on taking the journey through the show, on flourishes, the things that they can see, but they still can't tell you how the tricks are done. So this means that they don't have full access to what is possible to solve the problems that they perceive. If you've taken a critical theory class, then you will know that the author and what the author does is barely taken into consideration. And really, it is very possible to get too much reader advice. Over time, it piles up on Amazon or Goodreads. That is a good problem to have, because it is not a problem at all. You don't need to take it in. People taking the time to leave you reviews is a generous thing. You just don't need to use it as your writing advice. I doubt that most of those people intend for it to be taken as advice to the author. If you were to take everyone's advice, you are going to write the blandest thing imaginable. You have written by a huge committee, and anything that could be interesting is going to be struck down by someone. Now let's talk about taking the advice of other writers. But before that, let's talk about a comment I got on the video. I talk slowly. I talk slowly because I think slowly. For example, I am very good at correspondence chess, but any junior high chess club member would wreck me at speed chess. I encourage everyone to watch my videos on at least 1.25 speed if you want to hear me speak as quickly as a normal person does. On top of that, my presentation style is naturally loose because I work from an outline. I could speak more quickly if I was just reading a script to you, but I don't like reading scripts. You can tell the more that I've put into my outline, the more exact phrasing, because that is when my presentation is the most stiff. I'm not a good actor. And I just don't want to read a script to you. I write for the moments when my mind takes off and chases after something that I couldn't foresee. And I make these videos for the exact same reason. That is where the fun of making these videos comes from. It makes me feel a little bit more like we're having a genuine discussion even before I get to the comments and start really having discussions with all of you. So I know that I need to edit well. I need to edit better than I do in order to avoid redundancy, and slow spots. And I can definitely use to work on that more. And occasionally I get a comment telling me this. But one that I received recently, I just immediately dismissed by the time I got down into the body of the comment, because he said that I should work to get my videos down to 3 to 5 minutes in order to increase engagement. What that means is that unlike the people who curse at me and tell me to speed up, where they could still be telling me to make the same sort of video, but just faster paced, this person is telling me to switch my genre entirely. He is telling me to turn my channel into a tips and tricks channel that presents little nuggets in 3 to 5 minutes. He has not tried to help me tell the story that I want to tell. He is trying to get me to tell the story that he wants to tell. I have no interest in doing that. Nothing against tips and tricks channels. I do know that those are very popular and people eat them up. And I think that people need tips and tricks, but it doesn't interest me to make those videos. And also, that's oddly bad advice because it's exactly against the wishes of my current subscribers who subscribe to me based on the 20-minute long videos that I make. What he said that really got me was that I'm not respecting your time. While I am absolutely respecting you because I'm continuing to make the comment that you expected from me when you initially signed up. That's the part of the comment that took it from me just mentally responding, okay, buddy, TikTok's that way, and moving on, which is what I usually do, to actually making a video essay, probably well over 20 minutes about it. And I think that you can probably see the connection here, that the biggest danger to listening to advice from other writers is that most other writers don't think like editors. They think like writers. And they will naturally give you advice to get you to write the story that they would have written. Now, this advice isn't necessarily useless unless a person tells you that you should be working in a different genre, which is pretty useless. But most advice, even when they are telling you what they would have done, they're detecting a problem with the story and they are telling you maybe how they would have fixed it. At that point, you don't take their suggestion blindly. It, in this case, doesn't work for the story that you're trying to tell, but you can look at the problem that they are trying to solve with their advice, and you can see if there's a satisfactory way for you to fix it in your way. You can look and consider, is it valid? Try to get out of your own head as the person who created it and approach it as a person who has a lot less context. Or you might look at it and think, that's not actually a problem, but you might need to show why it's not a problem. Everything in writing is a trade-off. There is so little of your world that you can actually put on the page that every decision is a trade-off. What you put in and what you leave out. And you might need to find a better balance. But when you find someone who can give you a critique with the idea of helping you improve the story that you want to write, hold on to them. I myself have plenty of weaknesses, but one strength I have is that I have read very widely, and I never try to bend a story towards the story that I would write if I had that same concept. I am a logical writer more than I am a flight of fancy writer, and I think of these things as puzzles, so I honestly see it as a fun logic puzzle to take what's there and try to figure out how to shift things around to get it to where it's intended to go. And so I do have people who ask me for my writing advice, and I do have people who pay me to edit their work. Even though I am a writer, I do have an editor's brain. I don't think that this is nearly as rare as it's made out to be. I think there are a lot of writers who can do this if they try. So, a different question. Can you take advice from someone who can't execute that advice? Maybe someone in your critique group says that your protagonist is totally unbelievable, and yet they write the most stereotypical, flat, stock characters. What does their opinion count for? Well, there is the basketball coach analogy. Someone like Roy Williams, at 5'10", still has plenty to teach champion-level college basketball players. He just doesn't have the physical stature to be one of the champions. But how do you offer good writing advice without a writing mind? So I'm thinking of Gordon Lish, who you almost certainly know as an editor. And he would get deep into the sentence level of what he was working on, making absolutely brutal line edits. You can, if you want an example, of what he did, you can take a look at Raymond Carver's The Beginners and compare it to what we talk about when we talk about love, and see how transformative Lish's editing style was. He didn't just say, this is awkward. Like, he got in there. And he did know about writing fiction. He did write fiction himself. It's not what you know him for, but he did. I think that you need some level of writing ability to edit, at least to line edit and speak to the sentence level to offer solutions. Now, you don't need to be the best to be a coach, but you need enough to not just be an uninformed armchair quarterback. If a person has an editor's mind, they might be able to tell you what's wrong without being able to actually produce a work that displays the quality themselves. Okay, so what can you do besides, I don't know, going around and getting thousands of people to give you feedback on your stories in order to find the few who have the ability to make your story the best that it can be? So how do you get the most from your writing circle, from the people who you have access to provide advice? You can expand that circle for sure. But how do you take advice from someone who doesn't necessarily present it in the ideal manner? I would say there are a couple of things that I learned from leading group critiques. When you lead a critique, ask people to offer suggestions to improve the story that they're reading, not the story that they'd write instead. That it might surprise you how much good that does. A lot of times people don't really consider that there is actually a distinction there. And once they do, they can give much better advice than they could before. Number two, I would always start every critique asking, what do we like about this story? Some writers feel that it is useless coddling and that they need to be brutal. But first of all, brutal advice usually isn't listened to. It's shoved aside. The person's ego goes into defense mode to protect itself. And besides that, if all you're doing is ripping a story apart, then they may be very right in turning away from it, because it shows that you don't get what they were going for. And the question is, do you want to carry out some sort of power trip fantasy, or do you want to help? Besides that, starting on the positive will do a couple of very practical things. One, it will focus everyone from the jump on the strengths of the work, which makes it far more likely for everyone to see it as something that's worth improving rather than something to rip out by the weeds. Like they're more likely to offer suggestions on how to prune it into shape rather than rip it out by the roots. Two, it will let the writer know when one person's problem is against the majority opinion. This happens a lot in critique groups where positive feedback is not encouraged. If 9 people love a phrase and 1 person dislikes it, but the 1 person who dislikes it is the only one who makes a comment, then that phrase is very likely to be removed to the detriment of the work. It's so easy to just draw a bracket on it and write "love this," or put a comment on it if it's on a PDF. And it's not just to make the writer feel good. It serves a real purpose in improving the work. Third, if you find someone who helps you make the story you're trying to write better, treat them like the golden treasure that they are. They are rare and they should be appreciated. You might think that this is obvious, but providing feedback is very time intensive and is replacing something that a writer could be doing to further their own work. And yet a lot of people, it seems like, really take it for granted, especially if anything negative is said to them and they don't show appreciation for it. The last thing is that, of course, you have to realize that when you put something out into the world, you have invited feedback. but then you also need to only put an appropriate amount of stock in that feedback. So guys, this video was for the people who didn't believe me when I said that I am fueled by spite and pettiness. You see, you really can make things from a spiteful place. Anyway, it's all been in good fun. To avoid redundancy, I've been, and will continue to be, G. Allen Riker, reminding you to keep reading, keep writing, and keep living a full life.